They were legends, idols, and chart-topping stars. But behind the spotlight, these country icons turned into Nashville's worst nightmares. From scandalous addictions and backstage meltdowns to arrogance, betrayals, and shocking downfalls, their stories reveal the dark side of country music that fans were never meant to see. In this video, we uncover the 12 country stars whose names once lit up the stage, but whose actions left scars that Nashville will never forget. Hank Williams Jr., the rebel who went too far. Hank Williams Jr. grew up in the shadow of his legendary father, Hank Williams Sr., and for a time, it seemed like destiny had prepared him to continue the family legacy. He had the voice, the charisma, and the outlaw energy that captured audiences across America. By the 1970s and 80s, Hank Jr. wasn't just a rising star. He was a cultural force. His rowdy, hard-drinking, gun-toting image made him a hero to many fans who loved the rebellious side of country music. But the same qualities that elevated him to fame would also drag his reputation through the mud and turn him into one of Nashville's biggest nightmares. Hank Jr.'s life was marked by controversy at every turn. His near-fatal fall from a mountain in 1975 could have ended his career, but instead, it hardened his outlaw persona. He returned to the stage with a vengeance, embracing a wild lifestyle of alcohol, drugs, and open defiance of Nashville's traditional establishment. The industry didn't quite know what to do with him. Was he the heir to his father's legacy or the destroyer of it? As his fame grew, so did his arrogance and recklessness. His songs often glorified drinking and violence, reinforcing the image of a man living on the edge. Behind the scenes, his volatile temper and disregard for authority made him difficult to manage. While his fans saw him as a truth-telling rebel, many in Nashville saw him as a liability who cared more about shocking headlines than preserving country music's integrity. The real nightmare came in the 2010s, when Hank Jr.'s outspoken political rants crossed the line from rebellious to offensive. His infamous comments comparing President Obama to Hitler during an ESPN appearance didn't just spark backlash. It got him permanently pulled from Monday Night Football, where his "Are you ready for some football" anthem had become iconic. Nashville insiders cringed as the scandal dragged his name through national headlines for all the wrong reasons. For some fans, Hank Williams Jr. will always be a legend, a rebel who refused to bow to Nashville's rules. But for the industry, his career is a cautionary tale of how self-destruction, unchecked ego, and reckless words can turn a superstar into a nightmare that Nashville will never forget. Waylon Jennings, outlaw or Nashville's nightmare? Waylon Jennings will always be remembered as one of the architects of the outlaw country movement. A man who broke free from Nashville's rigid system to carve his own rebellious path. In the 1970s, when the polished, pop-influenced Nashville sound dominated the airwaves, Waylon's raw, gritty style felt like a revolution. Fans adored him for his authenticity and fearless independence, but Nashville insiders saw something different. A volatile outlaw whose defiance, addictions, and destructive habits made him a constant nightmare. Jennings' rise was inseparable from his struggles. By the height of his fame, he was not only one of the biggest names in country music, but also one of its most self-destructive. His cocaine habit was legendary. He later admitted to spending thousands of dollars a day on the drug. Those wild years left behind more than just music. They left a trail of canceled shows, erratic performances, and broken trust within the industry. Nashville promoters and executives whispered about his unreliability, and many quietly wished his rebellious streak would burn out before it burned the industry down. But Waylon's battles weren't just with substances, they were with Nashville itself. He despised the assembly line production of the Nashville sound, where artists had little control over their music. Jennings fought back, demanding to produce his own records, choose his own songs, and play with his own band. His defiance reshaped country music, inspiring artists to seize creative control, but it also made him a thorn in the side of every executive who tried to rein him in. To them, he wasn't just a troublemaker. He was a direct threat to the system that had kept Nashville running smoothly for decades. Behind the outlaw image, Waylon also left scars in his personal relationships. His wild behavior often strained his marriages and friendships, and his reputation for heavy partying made him both admired and feared. The very qualities that made him a legend also made him unreliable, unpredictable, and at times dangerous to work with. In later years, Jennings managed to clean up his life, leaving behind the worst of his drug abuse and gaining respect as a survivor. But Nashville never forgot the years of chaos he brought to its doorstep. Waylon Jennings changed country music forever, but for the gatekeepers of Music City, he will always remain one of the biggest nightmares they ever had to endure. Merle Haggard. From prison blues to Nashville's dark reminder, Merle Haggard's story is often celebrated as one of redemption. A boy who grew up poor, landed in prison, and somehow clawed his way to the top of country music. His songs about struggle, hardship, and working-class pride connected with millions, making him one of the most respected voices in the genre. But behind the praise and platinum records, Haggard's past and the demons he carried with him cast a long, dark shadow that made him a constant source of discomfort for Nashville's image-obsessed industry. Before fame, Haggard's life was a spiral of crime and incarceration. By the time he was 21, he had spent time in San Quentin State Prison for burglary and attempted escape. In a city like Nashville, where reputations were polished and every artist was supposed to represent family values, Merle's criminal past was a ticking time bomb. Executives worried how the public would react if fans looked past his music and saw the convict behind the microphone. Even after his release, he lived under the weight of that stigma, struggling to prove he was more than just a cautionary tale. Ironically, it was those very experiences that made him a star. Songs like Mama Tried and Sing Me Back Home spoke with a raw honesty no polished Nashville act could match. But the price of that authenticity was steep. Nashville insiders often regarded Haggard with suspicion, and law enforcement never seemed far behind. His run-ins with the police didn't end with his prison sentence. Over the years, Merle's life was riddled with arrests for fighting, drunken behavior, and other missteps that clashed with the clean-cut image the industry tried to maintain. His career also carried its share of controversies. Tracks like Okie from Muskogee were embraced by some as patriotic anthems, but others saw them as politically divisive, cementing Haggard's reputation as a polarizing figure. Nashville wanted stars who appealed to everyone. Merle wasn't afraid to alienate half the audience if it meant telling his truth. That stubbornness both defined his greatness and branded him as a nightmare for executives desperate to protect the city's commercial sheen. By the end of his life, Haggard had transformed into a respected elder statesman of country music, even receiving a full pardon from the governor of California. Yet the ghosts of his past never truly left him, or Nashville. To this day, his story is both an inspiration and a warning, proof that greatness can rise from darkness, but also a reminder of how fragile reputations in country music can be. For Nashville, Merle Haggard was not just a legend. He was a living reminder of everything they feared would tarnish their carefully built empire. Toby Keith, the patriot who became a polarizing force. Toby Keith's rise to stardom in the 1990s was nothing short of meteoric. With his deep voice, bold lyrics, and everyman persona, he became one of Nashville's biggest commercial success stories. Songs like Should Have Been a Cowboy and How Do You Like Me Now cemented him as a country powerhouse, while his image as a no-nonsense, flag-waving patriot resonated with millions. But behind the anthems and stadium tours, Keith's brash personality and unfiltered politics turned him into one of Nashville's most divisive and nightmarish figures. The turning point came in the wake of 9/11, when Keith released Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, The Angry American. The song's unapologetic call for vengeance struck a chord with some but outraged others. Critics labeled it jingoistic and inflammatory, while Toby doubled down, reveling in the controversy. His very public feud with the Dixie Chicks, who criticized U.S. foreign policy, escalated into one of the ugliest cultural battles Nashville had ever seen. Concerts turned into political rallies, with Toby at the center of the storm, fueling divisions that made the industry deeply uncomfortable. But his politics were only part of the problem. Behind the scenes, Keith's reputation for being combative and controlling gave him a reputation as one of Nashville's least cooperative stars. He clashed with record labels, fought with radio stations, and publicly berated critics. While many artists played the game to stay in the industry's good graces, Toby seemed to enjoy breaking the rules, even if it meant burning bridges. For Nashville executives, he was a nightmare. Too big to control, too loud to ignore, and too polarizing to manage without controversy. His arrogance also showed in his treatment of peers. Stories circulated about his short temper and confrontational style, with some artists and insiders describing him as impossible to work with. For fans, that swagger was part of his charm. For Nashville, it was chaos waiting to happen. Yet for all the turmoil, Toby Keith remained undeniably successful. He built his own record label, expanded into business ventures like his I Love This Bar and Grill chain, and maintained a loyal fan base long after his mainstream radio days waned. Still, the shadow of his controversies never disappeared. For some, he was a hero. For others, he was an arrogant bully who dragged Nashville's name into cultural wars it wanted no part of. Toby Keith's legacy is complicated. A superstar who embodied both the best and worst of country music's outlaw spirit. To his fans, he was fearless. To Nashville insiders, he was an unpredictable storm, a nightmare they could never quite wake up from. Billy Ray Cyrus, from overnight sensation to Nashville's embarrassment. In 1992, Billy Ray Cyrus exploded onto the country music scene with Achy Breaky Heart. The song was an unstoppable hit, dominating the charts and launching line dancing crazes across America. Practically overnight, Cyrus became a household name, selling millions of records and packing stadiums. For a moment, Nashville thought it had found the perfect crossover star, young, good-looking, and marketable. But the very same song that made him a sensation quickly turned him into one of Nashville's biggest nightmares. Critics savaged Achy Breaky Heart, calling it gimmicky and shallow. As its popularity grew, the backlash only intensified. Traditionalists accused Cyrus of cheapening country music, reducing the genre to a novelty act. Inside Nashville, whispers spread that he was more image than substance, a pop pretender exploiting country for a quick payday. Despite his undeniable commercial success, many insiders treated him as an outsider who tarnished the city's credibility. Billy Ray's career spiraled almost as fast as it had risen. His follow-up albums failed to match the success of his debut, and the media turned on him with brutal swiftness. By the mid-90s, he was more punchline than star. To Nashville's elite, he wasn't just a disappointment. He was an embarrassment, proof of what could go wrong when the industry chased fame over authenticity. But the nightmare didn't end with his music. As years passed, Cyrus became more famous for his family drama than his career. His high-profile role as father to pop superstar Miley Cyrus dragged him back into headlines, often for the wrong reasons. From Miley's provocative performances to Billy Ray's awkward attempts to relaunch his own career, the Cyrus name became tabloid fodder. Nashville groaned as Billy Ray, once their golden boy, seemed to invite chaos wherever he went. Even his comeback moments carried controversy. Collaborations like the 2019 remix of Old Town Road with Lil Nas X made him relevant again, but reignited debates about whether he was truly country or just opportunistic. While the song broke records, it further blurred the line between country and pop, a tension Nashville had never been comfortable with. Billy Ray Cyrus remains a polarizing figure, a man who tasted superstardom but never shook the perception of being Nashville's novelty act. For fans, he was unforgettable. For critics and industry insiders, he was the nightmare they couldn't wake up from, a reminder of how quickly Nashville's biggest hopes could turn into its deepest regrets. Blake Shelton, the golden boy who let fame go to his head. When Blake Shelton first appeared on the country music scene in the early 2000s, he was hailed as the next great voice of Nashville. With hits like Austin and Some Beach, he quickly established himself as a reliable chart topper. His charm, humor, and down-to-earth appeal made him a fan favorite, and his role as a coach on The Voice catapulted him into mainstream superstardom. For a while, Blake was the golden boy of country music, the kind of figure Nashville loved to showcase. But behind that polished grin and witty personality lurked a darker reputation, one that earned him a spot among Nashville's biggest nightmares. As his fame grew, so did his arrogance. Blake became known for his hard partying and love of alcohol, often bragging about his drinking habits in interviews and on social media. What started as a good old boy image soon spiraled into something less flattering. A man who couldn't be taken seriously because he seemed more interested in cocktails than craft. fans began to notice sloppy performances and crude jokes that chipped away at his credibility as a country star. For Nashville, his behavior wasn't just unprofessional, it was embarrassing. But it wasn't just the drinking. Shelton's sharp tongue made him a lightning rod for criticism. On Twitter, he often fired off mean-spirited jokes and offensive remarks, brushing off backlash as just having fun. While some fans enjoyed his humor, others saw it as cruel and immature. Nashville executives cringed as his social media spats grabbed more attention than his music, dragging the industry's name into unnecessary drama. Shelton also gained a reputation for arrogance within the industry. Peers whispered about his inflated ego, fueled by his crossover fame on The Voice. Once humble and approachable, he began carrying himself like a star untouchable by criticism. His divorces, especially the very public split from Miranda Lambert, only added fuel to the fire, painting him as careless with both his personal life and his professional reputation. Despite the controversies, Shelton remains one of country music's most visible faces. His TV presence keeps him relevant, and his loyal fans still pack his shows. Yet, for Nashville insiders, his career has become a balancing act between success and scandal. He embodies the risk of stardom, how quickly a golden boy can turn into a liability when fame, arrogance, and unchecked behavior take control. Blake Shelton may still hold the spotlight, but for many in Nashville, he's less a shining example of country's best, and more a nightmare reminder of what happens when an artist believes his own hype. Garth Brooks, the superstar who pushed Nashville to its breaking point. Garth Brooks is often hailed as the best-selling artist in American history, a man who transformed country music into a global phenomenon. With his high-energy concerts, crossover appeal, and ability to blend rock theatrics with country storytelling, Brooks became Nashville's biggest cash machine. But the same ambition that turned him into a superstar also made him one of Nashville's most polarizing figures. To many executives and fellow artists, Garth wasn't just a trailblazer. He was a nightmare they couldn't control. From the start, Brooks approached country music like a business empire. He demanded total control over his career, from concert production to merchandising. Nashville executives were thrilled with the money he generated, but uneasy about his methods. His over-the-top concerts with pyrotechnics and stadium theatrics broke from country traditions. Purists accused him of turning country into rock and roll spectacle, cheapening the genre's roots. Behind the scenes, some insiders whispered that Brooks wasn't just changing country music, he was destroying its soul. Then came his most infamous experiment, creating a rock alter ego named Chris Gaines in 1999. Intended as a crossover into pop rock, the project backfired spectacularly, confusing fans and embarrassing Nashville. What was meant to be a bold reinvention turned into one of the most mocked chapters in country music history. For years, Nashville struggled to shake off the stigma of that bizarre gamble. To critics, it was proof that Garth's ego had grown too big to be grounded in reality. But his clashes with Nashville didn't stop there. Garth often feuded with radio stations and retailers, refusing to let his music be sold digitally for years unless it met his strict terms. His decision to briefly retire at the height of his fame, then stage comebacks on his own schedule, frustrated the industry that had built its calendar around his success. He was no longer just an artist. He was a corporation, dictating terms to an industry that wasn't used to being dictated to. Even his return to touring brought controversy. Some fans accused him of overpricing tickets, while critics claimed his relentless focus on record-breaking numbers overshadowed the music itself. For Nashville, Garth Brooks embodied both the dream and the nightmare. Proof that country music could conquer the world, but also a reminder of what happens when one man becomes bigger than the city that made him. To this day, Brooks remains a legend, adored by millions. But in the backrooms of Nashville, his name still carries a sting. Garth Brooks wasn't just a superstar. He was the unstoppable storm that left Music City both richer and forever uneasy. George Jones, the no-show who haunted Nashville. George Jones is remembered today as one of the greatest voices country music has ever known. His timeless classics like He Stopped Loving Her Today made him a legend, and his ability to pour raw emotion into every lyric earned him the nickname The Possum. But for all his brilliance, George Jones was also one of Nashville's greatest nightmares. His career was not only defined by his talent, but also by his self-destruction, fueled by alcohol, drugs, and chaos that left promoters, peers, and fans shaking their heads in disbelief. By the 1960s and 70s, Jones was already building a reputation for being unreliable. His alcoholism spiraled out of control, and with it came one of the most infamous nicknames in country music history, No-Show Jones. He regularly skipped concerts, often without notice, leaving thousands of fans stranded and promoters furious. Some estimates suggest he missed more than 50 shows in a single year, costing Nashville millions and damaging the industry's credibility. Every booking with Jones was a gamble. Would he show up, or would he vanish into another binge? His reckless behavior wasn't confined to the stage. Jones was notorious for wild stunts while drunk, including once riding a lawnmower down the highway to buy more liquor after his wife hid his car keys. His personal life was just as turbulent, with multiple failed marriages, violent outbursts, and financial troubles that kept Nashville tabloids busy for decades. His marriage to Tammy Wynette, though iconic musically, was a roller coaster of love, addiction, and public fights that embarrassed the industry as much as it fascinated fans. For Nashville executives, George Jones was both a gift and a curse. His voice could sell records like no other, but his instability made him nearly impossible to manage. Managers, band members, and promoters often scrambled to cover for his absences or temper tantrums, while fans began to see him as unreliable despite their love for his music. Jones himself admitted later that his addictions nearly destroyed him completely. By the 1980s, after multiple near-death experiences and even an intervention by fellow artists, Jones began to slowly reclaim his career. He eventually became a respected elder statesman, celebrated for surviving his demons. But the scars remained: the canceled shows, the broken contracts, and the countless opportunities lost because he couldn't control his addictions. George Jones's voice was a gift Nashville will never forget, but his chaos was a nightmare they couldn't escape. His story is one of contrasts: the man who could sing like an angel yet live like a devil. And for all the glory he brought country music, he also left behind a cautionary tale of how even the greatest talent can nearly self-destruct. Tammy Wynette, the tragic first lady of country's chaos. Tammy Wynette, forever known as the First Lady of Country Music, gave the world unforgettable hits like Stand By Your Man and Divorce. Her voice carried both strength and fragility, capturing the struggles of women in love and heartbreak. But behind the iconic songs and glamorous stage persona, Wynette's life was a whirlwind of turmoil. For all her success, she became one of Nashville's most unsettling figures, her tangled personal life and shocking scandals turning her into a nightmare that haunted Music City. Her marriages became the stuff of country legend and tabloid obsession. Tammy walked down the aisle 5 times, each relationship seemingly more turbulent than the last. Her union with George Jones was both legendary and destructive, marked by drunken brawls, public fights, and tearful reconciliations. Their love story fueled some of the greatest duets in country history, but it also left Nashville scrambling to manage the fallout from their endless chaos. What should have been country's golden couple often looked more like a cautionary tale. Wynette's private life grew darker in the 1970s when she claimed she had been kidnapped, beaten, and abandoned by a mysterious assailant. The shocking story made headlines, but whispers quickly spread through Nashville that her account didn't add up. Some insiders believed she fabricated the incident to cover up domestic turmoil, while others suggested she was protecting someone close to her. The truth was never fully revealed, but the scandal cast a shadow over her career and left Music City reeling from the spectacle. Her health struggles added to the nightmare. Tammy was plagued by chronic pain for much of her life, leading to a heavy dependence on prescription drugs. Reports of erratic behavior, hospital visits, and unreliable performances piled up. Promoters often worried if she would be fit to perform, while fans watched their beloved icon deteriorate before their eyes. For Nashville, Wynette's personal suffering was both tragic and damaging, an unending cycle of drama that overshadowed her artistry. Despite her turbulent life, Wynette's career never fully collapsed. She remained a beloved figure, admired for her resilience and her ability to channel personal chaos into unforgettable music. Yet the scandals, health crises, and endless drama left Nashville weary. Tammy Wynette was more than just a star. She was a storm, beautiful and destructive, that the city could never quite contain. When she passed away in 1998 at just 55 years old, Nashville mourned her, but the legacy of her chaos lingered. To fans, she was an icon of strength and vulnerability. To Music City, she was a legend wrapped in scandal, an unforgettable voice that also embodied the nightmares Nashville never wanted the world to see. Willie Nelson, the outlaw Nashville couldn't tame. Willie Nelson is one of the most beloved figures in American music. His name's synonymous with outlaw country, and his braids, bandanas, and soulful voice etched into pop culture history. To fans, Willie represents freedom, rebellion, and authenticity. But to the gatekeepers of Nashville, Nelson was often a thorn in their side, an outlaw whose defiance of rules, brushes with the law, and headline-making controversies turned him into a nightmare they could never quite control. In the early years of his career, Nelson struggled to fit the mold of Nashville's polished assembly line system. His unconventional voice and laid-back style clashed with the city's preference for slick, radio-friendly productions. Frustrated, he abandoned Nashville in the 1970s and helped spearhead the outlaw country movement alongside Waylon Jennings. The movement gave country music some of its rawest and most influential sounds, but for Nashville executives, it also represented a loss of control. Willie's rejection of their system was a public rebellion, inspiring others to defy the establishment and shaking the foundations of the industry. Nelson's personal life only added to the chaos. His unabashed use of marijuana became both a signature and a scandal. While fans celebrated his openness, law enforcement and conservative voices in Nashville were less amused. His multiple arrests for marijuana possession turned into national news, forcing the industry to deal with an icon who constantly clashed with the law. Nashville, a city that had always tried to present country stars as wholesome role models, was left red-faced by Willie's unrepentant outlaw image. The financial scandals didn't help either. In the early 1990s, Nelson's infamous battle with the IRS made headlines across the country. He owed millions in back taxes, leading the government to seize his property and assets. Though he eventually repaid much of the debt with his album The IRS Tapes, Who'll Buy My Memories? The saga was humiliating for Nashville. Instead of celebrating one of its icons, the industry found itself associated with one of the biggest financial disasters in country music history. Yet through it all, Willie refused to apologize. He remained unapologetically himself, smoking pot on the roof of the White House, speaking out on political issues, and continuing to tour relentlessly well into his 80s. His authenticity endeared him to fans. But for Nashville, he was a constant reminder that they couldn't control every star under their banner. Willie Nelson may be cherished as an American treasure today, but during his rise, he represented everything Nashville feared. An untamable rebel who put principle above profit, scandal above safety, and freedom above conformity. For Music City, Willie wasn't just a hero. He was a living nightmare that rewrote the rules forever. Allan Coe, the outlaw who crossed every line. If outlaw country had a wildest child, it was Allan Coe. From the very start of his career, Coe wore controversy like a badge of honor. He emerged in the 1970s as part of the outlaw country wave, boasting of his time in prison and channeling his rough-and-tumble life into songs that shocked as much as they entertained. For fans of rebellion, Coe was the real deal. But for Nashville, he was a nightmare, an unpredictable, offensive figure whose behavior and music often went far beyond what even the outlaw label could justify. Coe's background was undeniably rough. He spent much of his youth in reform schools and prisons, including time in the Ohio State Penitentiary. While some admired his grit and authenticity, others saw him as a walking scandal. Nashville executives who were already uneasy with the outlaw movement were horrified by Coe's insistence on turning his criminal past into a marketing tool. Unlike Willie Nelson or Waylon Jennings, whose rebellion seemed charming or artistic, Coe's outlaw persona felt dangerous, reckless to the point of self-destruction. But it wasn't just his past. His music itself became one of Nashville's greatest embarrassments. While he wrote enduring hits for others, like Tanya Tucker's Would You Lay With Me in a Field of Stone, His own recordings often courted outrage. Some of his underground albums contained songs with explicit lyrics, racist undertones, and grotesque imagery that made them unplayable on radio and unmarketable to mainstream audiences. Industry insiders distanced themselves from him, fearing that his music could tarnish the genre's reputation as family-friendly entertainment. Offstage, Coe wasn't any easier to handle. Known for his flamboyant style, riding motorcycles, dressing in rhinestones and chains, he cultivated an image that was equal parts outlaw and circus act. But behind the theatrics, his ego and volatility alienated peers. Stories circulated of backstage fights, unfiltered insults, and behavior that kept him perpetually on the margins of Nashville's social circle. Even as the outlaw movement opened doors for authenticity and rebellion, Coe remained on the outside. He was too controversial, too raw, and too unwilling to bend. While fans admired his refusal to conform, Nashville saw him as a liability, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode into scandal. Today, David Allan Coe is remembered as both a prolific songwriter and one of the most polarizing figures in country music history. To his loyal fans, he was the ultimate outlaw, a man who lived exactly as he pleased. But to Nashville, he was chaos personified, a nightmare who blurred the line between rebellion and disgrace, and proved that not every outlaw could be tamed or celebrated. Johnny Paycheck, the outlaw who couldn't escape himself. Johnny Paycheck's name is etched into country history thanks to his working-class anthem, "Take This Job and Shove It." The song became a cultural phenomenon in the late 1970s, giving voice to millions of frustrated workers and catapulting Paycheck into the spotlight. For a brief moment, he was hailed as a champion of the everyman, a tough-as-nails star who embodied the outlaw spirit. But as quickly as he rose, Paycheck's life unraveled into a series of scandals, addictions, and crimes that transformed him from a hero into one of Nashville's biggest nightmares. Long before his breakthrough hit, Paycheck had already cultivated a reputation as a troublemaker. He was talented, a gifted singer and songwriter who had worked with legends like George Jones. But his temper and reckless lifestyle overshadowed his potential. Heavy drinking, drugs, and run-ins with the law followed him throughout his career, keeping him on the fringes of Nashville respectability. While his outlaw image appealed to fans, insiders knew he was unpredictable and dangerous, both to himself and to the industry's reputation. The chaos reached a boiling point in 1985, when Paycheck was convicted of aggravated assault after shooting a man in the head during a barroom altercation. Though the victim survived, the incident destroyed Paycheck's career. He was sentenced to prison, a shocking downfall for a man who had once topped the charts. Nashville, already weary of his destructive antics, distanced itself completely. For an industry that prided itself on selling relatable heroes, Johnny Paycheck had become a criminal headline they could no longer ignore. Even before prison, Paycheck's addictions had wreaked havoc on his career. He missed shows, clashed with promoters, and alienated fellow musicians. His once promising stardom deteriorated into a cautionary tale of wasted talent. By the time he was released from prison in the early 1990s, the country music landscape had moved on, and though he attempted comebacks, the glory days were gone. Nashville remembered him less for his music and more for the chaos he brought to its doorstep. Despite it all, Paycheck retained a loyal fan base who admired his raw honesty and refusal to sugarcoat his struggles. To them, he was a man who lived the outlaw life to the extreme, for better or worse. But to Nashville insiders, he represented the darkest side of country music's rebellion, a nightmare who proved that talent isn't enough to save someone from self-destruction. Johnny Paycheck's legacy is complicated. A working-class hero who sang the anthem of defiance, yet lived a life so turbulent it nearly erased his triumphs. For Nashville, his story stands as one of the starkest reminders that even legends can fall, and when they do, they often take the city's reputation down with them.